Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can all of you hear me?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. في تبجيل you can hear you.
Yeah. الله وبركاته.
All right. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wa salamun ala ibadihi lazina astafa amma ba'd. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تقولن لشيء إني فاعل ذلك غدا إلا أن يشاء الله واذكر ربك إذا نسيت وقل عسى أن يهديني ربي لأقرب من هذا رشدا سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. We're starting from verse number 23 of Surah Kahf, and I want to go back to the start of this surah because that will help us, inshallah, understand this verse, next verse that is coming. So, if you remember what happened at the start, what was the occasion of the revelation for this surah? That the kuffar of Quraysh, the unbelievers in Quraysh, they had sent some people to the Jews of Medina Munawwara to ask them that what is that we can do, since we also have noted that you also don't accept this person, the Prophet system, as a prophet, and we also don't accept him as a prophet. So what is it that we can do to disprove his prophethood, that we can raise as an objection against him? What questions should we ask him to expose him as a false prophet? And the Jews of Medina Munawwara, they being the people of Kitab, the Ahle Kitab, having a Torah and the ilm with them, they told the Quraysh Makkah that you should go back and you should tell your leaders that you should ask the Prophet ﷺ, ask him these three questions. First question, that what is Ruh? Second question, that tell us about the people of the cave, Ashab Kahf. And third question, that tell us about the person who traveled from the east to the west. So the Quraysh Makkah, they went back. They told their leaders that these are the three questions that we have to ask the Prophet ﷺ. And that is what brings us here to this verse. This verse here, verse number 23. And what happened is that Allah Ta'ala says here, وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا, that you should not say that you will do anything about any matter. As for example, that I will do this tomorrow. إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ, except that you say insha'Allah, that if Allah wills. Now what happens here in the story is that the Prophet ﷺ himself, when he was asked these three questions, he told the Quraysh Makkah that he will respond to them tomorrow. He did not have that ilm at that moment, but he knew that this is a test. And like any other test in the past, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent a revelation. So he will send a revelation this time as well to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he told them that they should come back tomorrow, and that tomorrow I'll tell the answer. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he forgot to say inshallah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not say inshallah. So to train the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ummah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send the revelation for the next 15 days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send the revelation for the next 15 days. And the next day, the mushrikeen, the unbelievers, they came to him, they asked him to tell them about the three questions, and he had no answer. And this continued for about 15 days. And the disbelievers, mushrikeen, the Quraysh Makkah, they were rejoicing and saying that this has been a very successful plan of ours because they have left, they thought that the Prophet's system is now silent. So then after that, the very first revelation that was sent to the Prophet's system after this gap, these 15 days almost, was this ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that do not say anything about any affair, any matter. Don't say that I'm going to do this. Inni fa'ilun zalika ghada. Except that you qualify that statement by adding that inshallah, that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. Now, understand that the hukum or the ruling for this is not farz, it's not absolutely mandatory. But as we noticed before as well, that there are other places in the Quran where the Prophet, even if you're slightly rebuked, slightly warned, slightly cautioned, or slightly educated about what to do. So this does not in any way indicate any type of sin, alayadu billah, by the Prophet. But this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this process of revelation giving us hidayat. Giving us hidayat. And, just like in Surah Fatiha, there's like different levels of hidayah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides people, and Allah ta'ala also guides the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. They're also recipients of hidayah. So the Quran is for all humanity. And it's also for the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, also for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the second thing here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this kitab, He also guides the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on how to be a prophet. And this is when I was teaching this other course in my university to some of the students about the proof of prophethood. And one of the proofs that the Quran is the divine word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not just a textbook written by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as some Orientalist scholars they have it, is that there are certain verses in the Quran which, if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was writing the Quran, alayadu billah, like they claim to be, those verses would never have been there in the Quran. And this is one of those verses that if this was man-made, if some person was writing the Quran, then why would they include such a verse which is rebuking them, which is cautioning them, which is slightly warning them? Why would anyone want to write such a verse that goes against them in the Quran? So this again actually is one of those ayat of the Quran which stand to disprove this theory of the Orientalist scholars who claim that the Quran is man-made. It's divine word, and that's why in this kitab, there are certain verses where Allah Ta'ala is addressing the Prophet ﷺ in a very loving manner, but also guiding the Prophet ﷺ on how to be a prophet. Sometimes you get the glimpses of that training, how the Anbiya ﷺ are being guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fulfill the duty of prophethood. And this is something that all of us knew or heard. And we see that whenever we say something, we say Insha'Allah. Or when we plan to do something, and maybe, some of us did not know that this is actually a verse of the Quran. Maybe some of us thought that this is a hadith or something that our parents told us, or it's just a good teaching, good etiquette, good adab. No, so this actually is the formal ayat of the Quran. And the very first person who was instructed to adhere to this teaching was the Prophet ﷺ himself. So this also points out to something else, which we have been explaining for the past few days, that we cannot confine, for the past few lectures, we have mentioned this principle about the usul tafsir, that you cannot confine a particular verse to a particular context. And the sabab-e-nuzul, or the occasion of revelation, is not in any way meant to confine that verse to that event alone. So it does not mean that this ayat was only for the Prophet ﷺ. And we should not say anything in particular about what we intend to do tomorrow. No, but rather this ayat is for everyone. It means any time in the future, and it's for everyone. So it's not just literally tomorrow. If you plan to do something, then you need to say Inshallah. But even if it's something distant in the future, even then a person should say Inshallah, and everyone should say Inshallah. There's a hadith where Sayyidina Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala an, he narrates from Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam, which is in Sahih Bukhari, that Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salatu wassalam said that I decided that one night I will go to my 90 wives and I will spend time with them, with each one of them, and Allah Ta'ala will bless me with a child with each one of them. And those children, they will fight, they will do jihad in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it was said to Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam, Kul insha'Allah, that you should say insha'Allah. But he forgot. And he went to all of his wives, and none of his wives produced any offspring. And except for one, but she gave birth to a child, was also not fully able. And Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala, he says that the Prophet ﷺ said that لَوْ قَالَ إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ لَمْ يَحْنَسْ وَكَانَ دَرَكًا لَهُ فِي حَاجَتِهِ. That if, in his statement, if Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam had said Insha'Allah, then his oath would have been fulfilled and he would have been able to attain his goal. So in the Quran, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this teaching that whenever you intend to do something in the future, say this word Insha'Allah. In fact, there are several verses in the Quran that we see, and this should be a daily regimen. Even in our mundane, trivial, insignificant tasks during the day, we should try to make this a habit, that anything that we plan to do, intend to do, we say Insha'Allah. For example, when Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, his parents and his brothers, they were entering into Egypt. So, udkhulu Misra insha'Allahu aminin. He mentioned this word, insha'Allah. Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, his dialogue with Sayyidina Khizr alayhi salam, which is also coming here in this surah, there also he said, Satajiduni insha'Allahu sabira. That you will find me to be person of sabr if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. When the Bani Israel were told to sacrifice a cow, so they also came to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and said that wa inna insha'Allahu lamuhtadun. Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, when his father Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam was taking him to sacrifice him, so Hazrat Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, he said to his father that do what you have been commanded to do, and satajiduni insha'Allahu minas sabirin. That you will find me to be, inshallah, you will find me to be amongst those who are patient. And similarly, not just in the Quran, there are several ahadith mubarakah where the Prophet ﷺ gave the same teaching, that whenever you intend to do something, make it a habit to say inshallah. Once a Sahabi invited the Prophet ﷺ, gave a da'wah that please come to our home and pray salah in our home. And the Prophet ﷺ replied that sa'af'alu insha'Allah, that indeed I will come if Allah wills. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, this is in Sahih Muslim, that for every Nabi, for every Prophet, they have one dua that is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that inshallah, I will store my dua for the hereafter. And I will use my dua at that time in order to intercede on behalf of my ummah. Hazrat Abdullah bin Zayd radiallahu ta'ala an, he had a dream. And he saw that someone was giving azan. He heard the kalimat of azan. This is before the azan became mashru'. He heard the kalimat of azan. So when he woke up, he went to the Prophet ﷺ and mentioned the entire dream, that I heard these words, someone calling out and giving azan in this manner. So the Prophet ﷺ, he verified that dream and said that, إِنَّهَا لَرُؤْيَا حَقٌّ إِنشَاءَ. Indeed, the dream that you saw is truth, if Allah wills, inshallah. And similarly, when the Prophet ﷺ used to go to the graveyard, one of the sunnah du'as a person should recite, masnoon du'as, is that you say salam to the people resting there. Assalamu alaikum, dara qawmin mu'min lahiqun. And there's a very deep meaning hidden in these words, insha'Allah. These are three separate words. Insha'Allah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. And the lesson, the deep lesson within is that in this world, in this universe, whatever is happening, it's happening because of the will and the wish, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Mashiach, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, that happens. فَعَالٌ لِمَا يُرِيد. He does whatever he intends. And in the Quran, there's so many instances where we see this, that every task, every deed, every work, everything, it's based upon the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mashiyat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, they get the tawfiq to make tawbah. وَيَتُوبُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَن يَشَاءُ. Right? Similarly, whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to misguide, or whomsoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to guide, they get that misguidance or they get that guidance. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يُضِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whomsoever He wishes, He creates in whatever manner He wishes. Allah ta'ala creates that person in that manner. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to give someone a boy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them a boy. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills to give someone a girl, Allah gives them a girl. So many places, we see that everything that is happening in this world, this universe, it's happening based upon the will, the mashiat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the real doer, fa'alul lima yurid. He does what He intends. So the practical lesson for work, we should build this as a habit of saying inshallah. View this as something that's none of our actions, they are possible except that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me tawfiq, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes, if Allah ta'ala wills. Otherwise, I do not have any strength nor the power to do anything on my own. So there is an aspect of humility. There is a recognition of one's inadequacy, that I am ajiz, I'm humble, I'm weak. If Allah wills, then this can happen, otherwise not. And a bonus here is that it also does not entail that you end up breaking your promise, because you tried your best, you are making effort, you are trying, but the results are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, then only that task will be completed, otherwise not. Then after this is another important phrase in the surah. وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. That you remember your Rabb, make zikr of your Rabb, إِذَا نَسِيتَ, when you forget. If you forget. Yani make zikr of your Rabb when you forget as well. That if you forget to say inshallah. So we see that the purpose why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making us say inshallah is zikr. It's actually to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So state of zikr. You must remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in particular, that here I have no ability, no guarantee that I will do this thing tomorrow, or have no ability or guarantee that I will last till tomorrow. So all of this will be based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you granting me this power. In a way to understand this ayah is that whenever a person forgets or they miss some act of obedience, so you should remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember the punishment that may come to a person, so that that remembrance will offset that heedlessness. So whenever a person slips in their acts of obedience, they miss their salah, you follow it up with remembrance, so that the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can offset the loss of heedlessness. Hazrat Ikrama rahmatullah alayh, in the tafsir of this ayah, he would add another dimension, that this ayat means that when you become angry, then do zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you become angry, then you do zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That in one of the old, the previous scriptures, it was mentioned that, oh, Bani Adam, when you become angry, remember me. And as a result, your anger will subside. And the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have gone to some depth and come up with another very beautiful meaning, that this ayat means that when you forget everything other than Allah, when you forget everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that and at that time, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with purity of your heart, with the sincerity of your heart. So say, person, not exclusively and to the exclusion of everything, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. To happen, you need to erase everything from your heart. Because normally the heart is with different parts, different things, different uh, desires, and the condition, the states of the heart keeps fluctuating. So because of that, it's difficult to attain oneness and focus and concentration, the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's because we don't have two hearts, that one can confine with Allah and use the other for interacting with the makhluk. We just have one heart. And as long as we have things which are other than Allah in our heart, then we will not be able to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that full sharpness, alertness, that focus and concentration. And on the other hand, if we can first empty our heart of everything else, we erase all of ghairullah, everything that is other than Allah, and then we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will be able to gain more focus, to drown the remembrance of Allah ta'ala. And this is called fana'i qalb, that a person drowns their heart remembrance of Allah, remembrance of Allah, and to the exclusion of X. This is what the goals was Kaiza. No. One should, in summarize, to summarize this point, this is one of the goals of a personal life, that we spend our life in such a way that we're always remembering Allah subhanahu. We cannot generalize the meaning that whenever you forget Allah subhanahu, which means that every moment, in whatever situation we should try to remember Allah subhanahu, to remember Allah subhanahu abundantly, zikr kasir, and to be attentive towards Allah subhanahu with our heart all the time. Because whenever a person becomes heedless, that is when the shaitan gets the opportunity back and he injects that waswasa, makes the person commit sin. These are the moments when a person should be extremely attentive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We also make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for such a state. That we present Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I am special mercy. That is thing that never hears of you. I'm always shaded by your mercy, by your rahmah. I don't want to be separated from you. Don't hand me over to my nafs even for the blink of an eye. This is the masnoon dua. The Prophet ﷺ himself used to make this dua. That don't hand me over to my nafs even for the blink of an eye. Allah Akbar. Imagine we stretch hours heedless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here the Prophet ﷺ is making dua that Allah don't make me forgetful of you even for the blink of an eye. And this is something that a person can get. It's not unreachable, it's not unattainable. There are people who have lived lives like that, where 20, 30, 40 spend the whole life in such a state. The Prophet ﷺ said, this was the state of the Prophet ﷺ himself, that all the time, kullu ahyanihi, every moment the heart would be attentive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are people like that even today as well. This is what we call wukufe kalbi, that you pause your heart on the remembrance of Allah. In the language of the Quran, this is called zikr kasir, that you remember Allah standing, sitting, and lying on your side. Yani in all postures, in all conditions, all states, you are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the sign of a true believer. And one of the advantages is that when a person is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time, they are safe. They become safe from the wasawis of nafs and shaitan. In Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the awliya, the muttaqi, the pious, the righteous people, that if they are touched by shaitan, immediately they do zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a result of which shaitan goes away. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِّنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. So immediately they do zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, وَذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. Can all of you hear me?
Sheikh
Is the
Sahib, now we
audio
can hear
okay?
you. Sheikh Sahib, now we can hear you. There was some break before. Now we can hear you.
जी शेख साहब
All right. I'm sorry. I think, okay. All right. So the last part of this ayah, this is back to the story of Ashab Kahf. وَقُلْ عَسَىٰ أَن يَهْدِيَنِي رَبِّي لِأَقْرَبَ مِنْ هَذَا رَشَدًا. And perhaps my Rabb, my Lord, will guide me to that what is closer in guidance. Now, what does this mean? Now, the general meaning of this, again, this is linked with the story about Insha'Allah. The general meaning, however, is that whenever we slip, it can be for anything. Now, we can extrapolate any meaning. It does not just have one meaning. So, for example, when we forget to do anything that requires us to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be it something that is a fard, an obligation, a mustahab, if you can remember it and do it later, then that is best. And at that moment, you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you what is akrab. Akrab is to remember to do the zikr at a proper time. So There's a story about this in the Hadith that there's a famous story that once the Prophet ﷺ was with the Sahaba Ikram and they camped out, and the Prophet ﷺ said to Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an, that you are the muazzin, so you should stand awake all night and watch, and then wake us up at the azan of Fajr. And then the Sahaba Ikram, they all went to sleep. The Prophet ﷺ, he also went to sleep. Hazrat Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an, he stood and stood and stood, but later sleep overcame him, and then the sun came out. So the rays, they fell upon the blessed face of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ woke up, and he woke up and he asked Bilal that, why is it that you slept through? You were supposed to wake us up for Fajr. We missed Fajr. All of the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, they missed Fajr. And Hazrat Bilal radiallahu ta'ala an was a very simple person. He said that, Ya Rasulullah, that same being, that same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who made you sleep, made me sleep as well. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he used the same words that if you forget, then you must remember, وَذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. That if you forget, you must remember, and do that remembrance as soon as possible. So when you remember, you should do that action that you forgot. So the Prophet ﷺ, he woke everyone up, all the Sahaba, they performed wudu, and then they all prayed Fajr in Jamaat. This was qaza. So the general meaning is that if you forget something, you should, and then you remember it later on, you should make, you should make it up. And you should then make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah grant me the ability that I can remember to do the right thing at the right time. And similarly, another layer and level of meaning here is that when you forget, you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when you are able to, and if you link this back with what we mentioned previously, that you empty your heart of all thoughts, and with that empty heart, you try to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exclusively. And to the exclusion of everything else, you do that zikr of Allah, and you also make dua to Allah Ta'ala that you also make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Allah, guide me to such a path, or guide me to such a way that I can remember you even in a better way. And this zikr can penetrate into my pores, and I can remember you all the time. So you use that as an opportunity to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for even better, for something that is even better than what you missed out on. So it's not that you're just trying to make up what you lost. You make that up, but then you ask Allah to give you even better than what you missed out on. Because Allah is Allah. If you, with humility, with the broken heart, you present your plea and you beseech Allah, you present your plea before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this is a moment which can attract that rahmat and mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bless a person with even more than what they missed out on. All right. And then after this, there's some other incidents about the Ashab Kahf that are mentioned. وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ ثَلَاثَمِائَةٍ سِنِينَ وَازْدَادُوا تِسْعَةً. So this is now the famous question that how long did the Ashab Kahf, they remained in that sleep? How long did they live in that cave? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the answer that they stayed in their cave for thalatha, 300 years. Wazdadu tis'a, and added 9. So that's 309. They've stayed in that cave for 309 years. And then right after this, Qulillah a'lamu bima labithu, that say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best how long they stayed. Lahu ghaibus samawati wal ard, to him belongs the unseen of the heavens and the earth. Abasir bihi wa asmi', how well he sees and how well he hears. Ma lahum min dunihi min wali, they have no wali other than him. They have no friend, no supporter other than him. Wala yushriku fi hukmihi ahada, and he lets no one share in his authority. So what does this verse mean? So first thing, that they lived in the cave for 309 years. Now there are two meanings here. The general meaning is that the people, they did actually stay in that cave for 309 years. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that now that I've told you the whole story, you should tell the mushrikeen that this is a small incident that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted me to show you the truth of my prophethood. And then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has immense treasure. And He has this immense knowledge of this whole unseen. Lahu ghaibus samawati wal ard. This small episode that happened thousands of years ago, this is nothing. This is just one small, tiny bit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's immense treasures and His immense knowledge of the unseen is way beyond that. This is just a drop, not even a drop in that. So if you're just impressed by this one fraction of a drop, then you should be blown away by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because His knowledge, His ilm, His treasures are unseen. Treasures of the unseen, knowledge of the unseen is immense. So now you should not be impressed by just my nabuwat, that I told you the story about what was unknown, but rather this should lead you to iman in that being who revealed the story to me. And that's the purpose of nabuwat. The purpose of nabuwat is to link the person back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make the people not just accept the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but that being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who sent the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's one way to look at this. And another view is that this position of 309 years is written in the books of Ahle Kitab, the people of the book. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ about this, so we should know that their knowledge is complete and Allah knows best for how long they truly lived here. There are some people who have looked at this from a scientific angle as well, that why didn't just say 300 years? Why that's 300 was dadu tis'a and then plus 9. We increased it to 9. Why this way of putting it? So they say that this has to do with solar years and lunar years. That from one perspective, it was actually 300 years, solar years 300. But when you convert that into lunar, then for every 100 solar years, you get about 103 lunar years. So 300 solar years would be 309 lunar years. And that's why this addition was dadu tis'a. And we see here another teaching, Kul Allahu a'lamu bima labithu, that say Allah knows best, Allah knows better. So this is also an adab which we are being taught here in this ayah, that when we speak, we present our research, and then after that we say Allahu a'lamu. We should say that, especially for those who are writing fatwas. So they try to first understand what the issue is, go in depth, trying to find what the correct answer is, and then write down the answer, give the dalil, the proof, the evidence. But at the end of all of that, they say, this is our position, Allahu Alam, and Allah knows best. And this is an i'tiraf, a recognition that again, we are humans and there's human deficiency. Our ilm is deficient, we are weak, and the reality of ilm belongs to Allah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And the fayda and one of the benefits of saying Allahu Alam is that it prevents this feeling of arrogance from coming into our heart. It prevents this feeling of pride. It helps to prevent a person from becoming proud, but rather it instills humility, ajazi. And this is why this has always been the way of our Salaf Salihin, that they would write this statement at the end, Wallahu A'lamu. And the meaning is that I did whatever I could do. I gave the reply, I gave my response, I wrote down this fatwa, I did it to the best of my ability, but the reality of this ilm lies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And with these words, one is able to save themselves from arrogance, and they are able to instill humility within themselves. Now, it's in the same ayah, Lahu ghaibus samawati wal ard. So there are four claims that are made here. The first claim is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that being who is alimul ghaib. Lahu ghaibus samawati wal ard. That to him belongs the unseen of the heavens and the earth. So what does this mean? Number one, that whatever there is in the heavens and the earth that is unseen, all of that is in the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, whatever the people of the heavens and no, the beings of the heavens and the beings of the earth, they conceal, they hide. Like, for example, human beings, the things that we hide from others. So whatever any creature, any makhluk, the things that they hide, all of that is in the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the things that all of us see in the heavens and the earth, like the sun, the moon, we recognize them, but we're not able to enumerate all of their benefits. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows all of their benefits. Those are unseen to us, but they're known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The countless infinite benefits of every single thing that is around us that we can see. So that's the first claim, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alimul ghaib. The second claim, the second statement is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sami'an basir. Abasir bihi wa asmi'. That how well he sees and how well he hears. And this should again make a person think that whenever I do some good deed, I should try to do it with the utmost level of sincerity, with ikhlas, to do my ibadah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, to earn the rada and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees everything that I'm doing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears everything that I'm saying. So I should make sure that whatever I'm doing it for Allah. We should make sure that I'm doing it sincerely for Allah sees what I'm doing. Allah hears what I'm saying. And for a believer, for a true believer, there is no greater gift than this, than the fact that Allah sees me and He hears me. Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, it's mentioned about him that when revelation came upon him, So he was with his family, and he was a bit worried about his family. Uh, you know, Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he had went to the Kohitur, the Mount Tur, and there he received the revelation, and he was alone. And he was worried back home that what would be the condition, the state of his family, whether they would have something to eat and would provide for them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him that you should strike this rock, this boulder, with your stick. And when he did, it split open, and there was a small stone that emerged. And then he was commanded again that hit the small stone with your staff, and he did that. And then inside that, another small stone, even smaller. And then he was told to strike it a third time. And when he struck that small, tiny stone, there was like a small ant type of insect that came out. And it was eating something in its tiny mouth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed the veils of hearing at that moment. And Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he could hear what that insect was saying. And he was saying that Subhana man yarani wa yasma'u kalami wa ya'rifu makani wa yadhkuruni wa la yansani. That all glory belongs to that being who is looking at me, who is listening to every statement that I'm saying, who recognizes my place, and who remembers me and never forgets about me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Basir, that even a small little creature, insect, was in the belly of a stone, which is itself in the belly of another stone, which is itself in the belly of yet another stone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears. Abasir bihi wa asmi'. Allah is Basir. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayh has said that Basir means that being who sees, and who sees that even if something is wherever it is, it's up on the arsh, it's below the taht al-thara, whatever it is, it's not distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it. يَبْصُرُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. Allah can see your side glances and all the secrets that a person has hidden inside their chest. Allah sees all of that. And Sami' means that being who can listen to even the thoughts that you have inside of your heart, your batin. So this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala seeing and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hearing. Abasir bihi wa asmi'. Then the third statement, Ma lahum min dunihi min wali. Ma lahum min dunihi min wali. That they have no supporter, any people, all of humanity, any individual, no one has any supporter other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is in the dominion, the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one has any supporter, any helper, any friend other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the last statement, وَلَا يُشْرِكُ فِي حُكْمِهِ أَحَدًا, then he lets no one share in his authority. There's no minister, there's no vice president, there's no sharik, there's no partner. There's no mushir, there's no minister, counselor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from every single type of defect, flaw, shortcoming, nooks. In the hukum of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no partner. He shares with no one. His hukum is his hukum. His amr, his judgment is his judgment. No one participates with it. No one has a share in his authority. So these are the four statements regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So right after this, we have, so first this was the introduction about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and now we have an introduction about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there are 5 responsibilities, fara'iz, of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which are mentioned here. What are the 5 responsibilities that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is tasked with? So the first one, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ, that you recite what is revealed to you in the book of your Lord. So this is addressed to the Prophet ﷺ, that you should recite what has been revealed to you from this book that we have sent to you. And this is now that being, the Prophet ﷺ is being told that alal i'lan, that now openly, publicly, you should recite these verses of the Quran to people. So the Prophet ﷺ would go and he would recite these ayat to the people, and people would write down, some people would write down those ayat. There are 2 types of tilawat. This word, yatlu, watlu, to do tilawat. There are 2 types of tilawat. And we should try to adopt both these styles of tilawat. One is tilawat lisani, that one recites simply with their tongue. And the other is tilawat qalbi, that one also reflects and ponders and tries to understand those ayat as well. So we should try to combine both. Do tilawat with our tongue, recite the Arabic of the Quran every day, but also reflect and ponder and trying to understand the deep meanings of those ayat. Hakim Tirmidhi rahmatullah alayhi, he says that there are 3 types of people who do tilawat of the Quran. First are those who do tilawat who are able to enjoy when they recite the Quran, and they enjoy the promises which are made in the Quran. This is one daraja, one level, that you hear about Jannah, you hear about the fruits in Jannah, the blessings of Jannah, and you enjoy reciting. You enjoy. And then there is a second class of people who do such a tilawat that they get the lazzat of actually conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a different type of lazzat. It's a different type of enjoyment. Not the enjoyment that I will get this and this and this and that in Jannah, but this is just the lazzat, the joy of conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like conversing with someone who's your beloved. This is the a'la, a higher daraja. And then there's a third level of tilawat, where there are some people, very exceptional, very unique, very rare, that while reciting the ayat, the things that they're reciting, these people are actually able to do mushahida. They're able to witness those things. The realities of those things, they're witnessing it. They're witnessing that nur, the reality, mushahida. Yani while reciting, the essence of those verses are descending into their heart. The nur, the essence of the ayah is the nur contained in that ayah, because every ayat is a sifat of Allah, Quran, remember, is the kalam, the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sifat, his attributes. So the essence of the Quranic ayat are actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes. There is a noor in every ayah, in every word. And these are the people, when they recite the Quran, they can feel that noor, the essence of that verse, descending into their heart and filling their heart with that noor. Their heart becomes munawwar. So we should try to do tilawat-e-Quran. This is a book that the more and more you recite, it's like a magnet. It will attract the rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's that azim, and it's the only kitab that the more and more you recite, your heart will never get tired from reciting it. But every time you will grow further and more in a longing, in a yearning for this kitab. And even if a person is not able to understand the meaning, simple recitation itself will give fayda, but also give fayda benefit. So there's some adab that we should remember when reciting the Quran. When doing tilawat Quran, there are some adab which pertain to our outer, and there are some adab which pertain to our inner self. The adab which pertain to our outer self, number one, is that we should recite Quran, it's mustahab, that you be in a state of wudu. Because tilawat is also ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be in a state of wudu. Sit in a place which is clean and neat, and if possible, try to face the Qibla. And before starting, say A'udhu Billah, Bismillah, and then recite Quran with tartil, with good pauses. You don't race through the Quran, and you recite the Quran with the proper tajweed. Our mashayikh, they even say that if while reciting the Quran, you can acquire the face of someone who was crying, this is also mustahab and recommended. That if you're not able to generate those feelings on your own, at least acquire the facial expression of someone who is being moved by the Quran, who can feel the azmat of the Quran. If you cannot cry, our mashayikh, our salaf saleen, they would cry while reciting the Quran. If we cannot bring ourselves to cry and shed tears, we can at least acquire the facial expression of having tears in our eyes. And then the inner adab of tilawat Quran is that we recite the Quran for the rada and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not a worldly motive or some ulterior hidden purpose, but only to attain the rada and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because in a hadith in Barakah it comes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept any amal except that which is done sincerely and purely for His sake, which is done seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we want the tilawat to be makbul in Allah, we need to ensure that we purify our intention and make it only for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then also try to ponder and reflect on the meanings of the words that we are reciting. Try to recite the Quran as if we're reciting it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, or as if we are listening to this Quran being recited from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to us. And you feel the Quran, that every ayat is intended for me. This is one very important rule, adab, etiquette, that you personalize the ayat of the Quran, make it specific to your own self, that I am the intended recipient of this ayah. So it's not, even if it's some story about the previous communities where that story is written for me, and there is a lesson that I need to extract from this story for myself. And that's really what the hakikat of the Quran is, that it is directed to us, to me. It's like a love letter sent by Allah addressed to me. So we should try to feel the Quran in that manner, where you make the meanings specific to your own self. That what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying to me? What is the lesson that I have to take from this ayah? And then try to inculcate that, practice that in your life as well. The Sahaba Ikram, they had such a ta'alluq with the Quran, such a deep, loving relationship with the Quran. And it's because of that ta'alluq that they would have so much blessings and barakat in their life. They would do tilawat Quran. They would sometimes even just listen to other people reciting the Quran, and they would be so moved. Their hearts would be so moved that they would start shedding tears, crying. And the Quran actually testifies to this. That وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ تَرَى أَعْيُنَهُمْ. That when they listen to that which is revealed upon the Prophet ﷺ, you can see that their eyes are flowing with tears from the haqq, the truth that they have recognized in those words. So see, they're listening to the Quran and tears are flowing from their eyes. Why? Because they would get this joy, this delight, this lazzat from listening and reciting the Quran. And among the Sahaba Ikram, one of the foremost Sahabi and one of the foremost in terms of love for the Quran was Sayyidina Siddiq Akbar radiyallahu ta'ala an. Ashiq Quran. Mother Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she says that when there was this episode in Medina Munawwara where some people had slandered her, so she took permission from the Prophet ﷺ and went to her parents' house. And there, when she entered, she saw that her father, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala an, was sitting on the bed and reciting the Quran, and tears were flowing from his eyes. So this is the love of the Quran. That when they would recite the Quran, do tilawat Quran, tears would begin to flow from their eyes. Imam Ibn Sirin rahmatullah has mentioned that when Sayyidina Usman radiallahu ta'ala an was martyred, when he was shaheed, his wife, she said that you have martyred, she said to the people that you have martyred someone, that person who would finish the whole Quran in one rakat during the night. Who would finish the whole Quran in one rakat during the night, you have martyred that person. He was one such person who would recite one Quran in one day, one night. Allah Akbar. And there's so many examples like that. And you might think, well, these are old stories. One Quran, one day. How is that possible? Personally, I can testify. I'm a witness to this. Just this year, Ramadan, the Ramadan that just passed by, we were doing i'tikaf in the Masjid of Abra Sheikh. And there we met someone who recited one Quran from Ishraq till Zohar. Personally, I went up to and asked him. And he did this in two rakat. One Quran from Ishraq till Zohar in a state of fasting. And he did it multiple times in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So even today, we have people like that who are able to complete one Quran in one day. And we cannot complete one juz in one day. Some of us cannot do half a juz in one day. Some of us are not even able to open one page and complete one page every day. So this is something that all of us we need to work on to improve our ta'alluq with the Quran, and simply first level ta'alluq, which is the tilawat Quran, tilawat of the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For this is the tilawat of the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyone, Quran is a connector. Anyone who wants to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best way to connect to Allah ta'ala is through the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more and more we recite the Quran with feelings, as if we are reciting a love letter sent by our lover. We are the beloveds of Allah. Recite it with that same feeling of anticipation, that same feeling of expectation, of excitement. And imagine the essence of every verse descending upon to your heart when you recite the Quran. Masar bin Qudam rahmatullah said that one night I entered the masjid and I saw this one person reciting salah. And it was nafil, so this person was reciting it slightly audibly. And he says, I liked the kirat, the way in which this person was reciting the Quran. So I continued listening. فَقَرَأَ سُبْعًا, and he recited one manzil. And he says that I thought that now he will do ruku. But he did not do ruku, he continued reciting until he had completed 10 juz of the Quran and still not performed ruku. And then he completed 15 juz of the Quran and still did not perform ruku. And then he completed the whole Quran in one rakat. And then when he finally completed his salah, فَنَظَرْتُ, I looked upon at that person and I saw فَإِذَا هُوَ Abu Hanifa. He was Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayh. So these were people who were Quran, lovers of the Quran. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them such izzat. Allah ta'ala raised them up, became them Imam Azam. My own Sheikh used to say that if you look at the whole history of this ummah, anyone who has been given kubuliyat by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, acceptance in work of deen, you will find one of two things in them. Either they themselves are ashik and lovers of the Quran, or they get the du'as of someone who is a lover of the Quran. One of those two has to be there. Either they themselves are lovers of the Quran, love to recite the Quran, or secondly, you will find that they are getting the du'as of the lovers of the Quran, and it's their taluk with the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them qabuli and acceptance in this world. And you can go all the way back, straight back to the Sahaba. Sayyidina Siddiq Akbar radiyallahu an, lover of the Quran. Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala an, so moved by the Quran that he accepted Iman by listening to the Quran. Lover of the Quran. Sayyidina Usman radiyallahu ta'ala an, lover of the Quran, would finish one Quran in one rakah. He was martyred while reciting the Quran. He would say that if your heart is pure, your heart would never tire from reciting the Quran. You would want to go on and on and on. Hazrat Ali radiyallahu ta'ala, lover of the Quran. Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayh, lover of the Quran. Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh, such a love for the Quran that once he was traveling from Makkah Mukarramah to Medina Tayyibah, and it took him 16 days. And in those 16 days, he says, I completed 16 Qurans. One Quran every day. MashaAllah. And today we go for 15-day Umrah trip and not even one Quran. We're not able to complete one Quran with all our AC, luxury cars and hotels and these are 16 days, 16 Qurans. Ashik, lover of the Quran. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayh, lover of the Quran. He was whipped and lashed, but he did not give up his belief about the Quran. And if you want to look at recent examples in our history, then we have the founder of Tablighi Jamaat, Hazrat Maulana Ilyas Rahmatullah alayh, such acceptability, such kubuliya, that almost anywhere you go, you see the work of Tabligh. And what is interesting is that Hazrat Maulana Ilyas Rahmatullah alayh, his father was a lover of the Quran, would teach small kids who would come teach them Quran. He got the du'as of a lover of the Quran. So you will find these two things. Either the person himself is a lover of the Quran, or they're getting du'as of someone who was a lover of the Quran. So if we can also bring ourselves to this and develop a taluk, a relationship with the Quran, then the Quran is a book that gives a person kubuliya and acceptance in this world and also shifa'at in the next world. So first part, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوهِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ, that you recite what has been revealed to you of the book of your Lord. And you can see this is Amr, Sighai Amr, recite. La mubaddila li kalimati. There is no one to change his words. There is no one to change his words. So this is something about the miraculous nature of the Quran, that it cannot be changed. وَلَن تَجِدَ مِن دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا, and you will never find a refuge besides him. All right. We'll stop here. And inshallah, the next ayat is also even more important. They're all equally important, but in their own right, every ayat. And again, remember, these are like five responsibilities, five fariza, tasks with which the Prophet ﷺ was sent with. So we did the first one today, which is tilawat al-Quran. And inshallah, we'll do the second one next class. We end by making this dua to Allah Ta'ala, that may Allah Ta'ala make all of us people who can have a strong taluk with the Quran. And may Allah Ta'ala grant us this love for the Quran, this ishq of the Quran, and the lazzat and the joy of reciting the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant this ni'mat and blessing to all of us. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Any questions before we end? Who would finish Quran in one night? I skipped the names, but there are so many people who had a habit of finishing one Quran. Imam Nawawi Rahmatullah alayh, in his book At-Tibyan, he has mentioned some names. For example, Hazrat Usman radiyallahu ta'ala an, Hazrat Tamim Dari radiyallahu ta'ala an, Hazrat Sa'id bin Jubair Rahmatullah alayh, Imam Mujahid Rahmatullah alayh, Imam Hanifa Rahmatullah alayh, Imam Shafi Rahmatullah alayh, all of them. They would complete one Quran in one day night. Hazrat Abdullah bin Zubair radiyallahu ta'ala an would finish one Quran every night. Right. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम वरहमतुल्लाह।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम वरहमतुल्लाहि
वालेकुम
वबरकातुहू।
अस्सलाम वरहमतुल्लाह।
हाँ, बिल्कुल साथ में।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम वरहमतुल्लाहि वबरकातुहू। जज़ाकल्लाह खैर शेख साहब।